Well, joining me now to try and unpick some of this is Mev Brown, who is the former spokesperson for Business for Britain in Scotland. And in Edinburgh, we're joined by the former leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Kezia Dugdale. Now, first of all, Mev, we're here in this busy shopping area, but 62% of Scots voted to remain. But you think really leave is the better option?
It's not so much the better option, it's the best option. Firstly, one thing I'd want to mention is during and since the referendum, I've conducted a lot of private polling, and it all shows that Scotland's broadly in line with the rest of the UK. I think the issue on the day was the Scottish political elite were presenting a united front against the Scottish electorate. So I think a lot of soft Remainers decided to vote Remain. I think a lot of swing voters decided to stay at home. And I think a lot of soft Brexiteers decided to remain at home. And I think that's what's warped the result in Scotland, rather than a fundamental difference of view in between Scotland and the rest of the UK.
When I was out on the streets earlier this morning asking people about whether they knew what Brexit was going to mean for them, there was still an awful lot of confusion. What would you say to convince people that are confused about why you believe this would be a good thing for Scotland to be out of the EU?
There's so many answers to that question. I think one of the things, I've been commentating on politics for 15 years, and one of the things I've come to realise is that the best politicians never lie, they just never tell the truth. So the question you have to ask yourself is, well, what are they hiding? And I think, to me, one of the biggest indicators of Brexit is youth unemployment. In 2008 we had a financial crisis. Now, during a recession, a lot of employers stopped recruiting, some laid staff off. So the people that pay the highest price for recession is school leavers and university graduates, because jobs are drying up. Now, 10 years after the recession, the European Union's average youth unemployment is 15%, France is 20%, Italy is 30%, Spain is 33% and Greece is 43%. In the UK it's 4%. So what those figures tell me is that Britain has made the necessary structural reforms to its economy to continue creating jobs, to continue to create profitable businesses. In Europe, they haven't made the policy changes, the improvements to infrastructure. They haven't changed anything. They're still basically where they were in 2008. Now, as Gordon Brown told us last week, the next recession is possibly around the corner. So my concern is the European Union's economy is basically a house of cards. A small financial impact could just bring the whole thing down. Whereas I think the British economy is much more robust and will deal with the next recession much better. But irrespective of that, I think one of my concerns for the European Union is it allows a lot of politicians to pursue quick fixes, easy solutions. One of the things people talk about is the shortage of teachers and the shortage of nurses. Now, there isn't a shortage of teachers and there isn't a shortage of nurses. There's a shortage of teachers working as teachers, and there's a shortage of nurses working as nurses.
So Mev, can I bring in Kezia Dugdale, the former leader of the Scottish Labour Party? You heard there what Mev had to say about those policy areas. What's your reaction? Because, of course, you were a Remainer.
I was a very strong Remainer, and I'm now advocating for a people's vote because I represent the capital city of Scotland, Edinburgh, where we have an economy that's heavily reliant on EU nationals. We've got a situation where 40,000 EU nationals living in the city don't know what their future holds for them. They also run our public services, and we would be in a desperately sorry situation without them, whether that's consultants in our hospitals, academics in our universities, or care workers who are looking after our most vulnerable citizens. Now, I was sent to Parliament to fight for the rights of working people, and I am utterly convinced, because every bit of evidence I have ever seen tells me so, that Brexit is going to be bad for jobs, it's going to be bad for employment rights, and it's going to be bad for the rights of working people, the cost of living, the prices in our shops. And I think I have a duty as an elected politician to be very honest and very clear about that and say there is no good Brexit. This is going to have devastating consequences for the UK economy, for Scotland's economy, and as a consequence the poorest people will suffer the most as a result of that. It has to be stopped.
Now, a second independence referendum is still very much on the table, Kezia Dugdale, depending on the outcome of the Brexit deal. This is the 4th anniversary of the independence referendum in Scotland. What would you say to that today?
Well, I think it's important to recognise that just over the weekend there we discovered that the SNP's oil figures were out by £30 billion. So the idea that independence is some sort of escape route for the problems that we face caused by Brexit, I'm afraid, doesn't stand much scrutiny. I want to stay in the European Union and in the United Kingdom because I think that's the best deal for working people. Now, the reality is that Scotland voted to remain within the European Union, and there's a big onus on Scotland to keep fighting for our place in the European Union. If we can't do that, at the very least, we have to make the case for remaining part of the single market, because that's how we ensure that we still have free movement of people, that allows those academics to stay in our universities, for those care workers to still do the critical job that they're doing. If I can just give you one figure, Catriona, that I understand the BBC themselves did an FOI which demonstrated this earlier today. If you look at the Western Isles, a very remote part of Scotland, there are 12 NHS consultants working in the Western Isles just now. 8 of them are EU nationals. Imagine what would happen to the services in that community if those EU doctors were not allowed to stay. This is fundamental and incredibly serious threat to our public services, and I think anyone with an interest in standing up for working people has a duty to speak out.
Kezia Dugdale in Edinburgh, Meg Brown with me here in Glasgow. I think we're all going to have to agree to disagree. This is a debate that is going to keep going on and running with more questions still being asked, I think, than answers.